What's up? It's Matt. It's Friday. It's another expert roundup, 111th episode to be exact. Eric will be back in 1 second to talk biz.
111.
I didn't know if you were saying 111 or you were a dirt bike revving up.
No, like 111. I like it, man. Episode 111. I dig that.
111. Yeah, this is the 111th episode of this podcast. And then I've got my MPTV, which is on like 106 or 107, but you're on like episode 4,421, right?
I think I'm 885, about to eclipse 900. Really excited about that. About a year away from 1,000. Just keep going, man.
That's awesome. So tell the studio audience and internet land who you are.
So Eric Cacciatore, founder and host of Restaurant Unstoppable podcast, where the mission is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. And we do that basically just by sharing the life journeys of the most successful restaurateurs out there, and just paying attention to what they're saying, who they're recommending, and kind of just picking up the clues and following up and making content out of that. Just kind of showing my work and the obstacle is the way mentality. Just kind of listen and follow up, right?
What about a second podcast you start called Restaurant Stoppable, where you follow up the people who ran shitty restaurants and say, dude, why did you run such a bad restaurant? And
that's a great idea, man. People keep on telling me I should start a network where I do multiple, shows under the Unstoppable brand. So that's an absolute great idea. I should do it.
This is how to be stopped. We always joke on our end that we're going to start it. I'm not a negative guy. So like America's Best Restaurants, and our journey is not to review restaurants. It's to find places that are awesome, that are doing it right, and to highlight them. But every once in a while we run into a jackass. And I'm like, dude, if I ever start America's Worst Restaurants, I can't wait.
Yeah, dude.
They have you own your category.
And there's a lot of jackasses in the industry. And, that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to remove myself from the process of being a guest on the show. People write me to be a guest on the show, and I'm like, I don't decide. My guests decide. And that's I think one of the unique things I do. I ask all my guests, who do you respect and admire and believe would make a great guest in the show? And the thing is, success recognizes success. I like to say behind every great restaurant's a great person. Yep. And the thing is, it's really easy to buy media today. It's not hard to get attention. And I'm trying to kind of be the end of that. Like, I turn away so many publicists who would try to, throw their clients in front of me. Yep. And it's because I'm trying to do this in a word of mouth type way with integrity, and so yeah.
And I don't want to zero in on restaurants, because there's a lot of jackasses running every business out there. My wife calls me jackass a lot, so I'm probably one of them. But there's a lot of people. It's easy to start a business in America, and that doesn't necessarily mean because you got a business card and you got a sign on your car doesn't mean you have a clue what you're doing.
Exactly. What are we here to talk about today? What's the mission? What are we doing?
Talk restaurant business. I want to pick your brain about what you've seen since last time we talked. What's on the street? What's going on? I'm gonna tell you a funny story that happened to me yesterday that was kind of comical. I went on the road yesterday for the first time with our ABR crew, the filming shows, and we filmed 4 one Wednesday, 3 yesterday. And I went because I wanted to give a couple of our guys a week off. And it's kind of comical. I'm in this one restaurant. The guy has 3 restaurants, and we followed them to all 3. They're like an hour away from each other. So it's pretty fun because we're like a little road show going to his 3 restaurants. And we get to the third one, and his like director of ops walks up, and she's like, hey, is that so-and-so up at the bar? And they all look. And they're like, I don't know. I haven't seen that guy in a while. And I'm like, well, who's that? And she goes, we banned this guy that looks just like that from our restaurants because we caught him doing some unscrupulous stuff in the restaurants, like harassing employees, handing out mysterious product to people. It was just bizarre.
Yeah.
And so the minute that he realized we were all looking at him, he literally got up and left. And so the bartender walks over and he's like, hey, man, you guys know who that is? And they go, we have a clue who it is. And he gives him his business card. And they're like, that's who we thought it was. He's banned from our restaurants. Like, why? No, he's trying to figure out how he can get back in. They're like, never. The guy goes, he can give me $1 million in a briefcase tomorrow, and the dude ain't coming back in because of the way he treated our people and some of the unscrupulous stuff he was doing, like roaming around the restaurant with guests. And we'll pass on that one. But I thought that was funny because I had never witnessed something like that in person.
Well, you bring up a really good point, and that's actually one of the many topics that's come up on the show is when is going too far. Like we always say the customer is always right, but until they're not. And when is that line? When is the customer not right? Yep. And it's when they question the integrity of one, your staff or to other guests.
Yep.
If there's a customer in there that is making other guests have horrible experience or just questioning the integrity of your staff, it's time to break up with that guest. And that's a totally good example of when to do it. I'm curious, what was this guy doing? I feel like you know more. You're holding back.
He was handing out. They didn't want to say what it was, but they said he was handing out pills of some sorts, and people were like, "What do you want? Like who? What is this?" And he was, I don't know. They said it was just really awkward, and they said they didn't want to go any deeper, except don't ever walk back in our door again.
I mean, that's a perfect example of a guest making other guests feel uncomfortable and making staff feel uncomfortable. It's time to say, don't come back.
It was so funny too, because she brought it up, and then we're all talking, and we look over, and I look over after they kind of reconvene, and I see him literally like skirt out. Like you could tell he was on the incognito. I go, well, I'm going to guess that was probably your guy based on how he just scurried out of here. But what's comical was he left his business card. And I'm like, hey, not only do we not want you in the restaurant anymore, but now we know who not to do business with of what you do for a living. But no, you're right. The customer is not always right. I remember this goes back to like 2005-ish. I was walking down the hallway of our boat dealership, and my brother, who was our service manager and my business partner, and a very calm and collected guy, but honestly could be pretty dangerous if you crossed him with his trainings from the military. And this guy is just MFing him up and down, like you name it. And I walk up and I tap the guy on the shoulder. It was kind of weird dynamic in our business. Everybody viewed me as the boss because I was kind of that role as the running the company. And my brother, even though we were equal partners, was more of the division manager, but they all looked at me as the boss. And so I walk up and the guy's like, oh, hey, Matt, what's up, brother? And I'm like, what's up? Is you're fucking leaving? What do you mean? I'm like, I just heard what you said. We're just having a conversation. I'm like, Sam, were you just having a conversation or do you want to twist this guy's head off? And he's like, the latter. I said, that means my brother's mad right now. That don't happen very often. So I'm just going to give you about 3 seconds to leave the business and don't ever come back. I don't care what your excuse is. You never, ever talk to somebody in that manner. And this guy he couldn't believe that he had just been asked. And I'm like, customers are right every once in a while, are wrong every once in a while, brother.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds me of this other point that I like to make, that is, we all think we write our culture down, and that is what our culture is, what we wrote down on paper however many years ago. But your culture is what's happening in this moment right now today. That is your culture. And if you put up with stuff like that, if you let stuff like that happen, then that's the reality. That is your culture.
Yep.
That you're telling everyone that this is okay. When things happen that shouldn't be allowed to happen, when these things happen, you got to stop it right there. You got to make an example of it, because
otherwise it festers and then it happens again. And then people are like, well, I guess he doesn't have my back. What the hell am I here for?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I had one come up recently where with our team, I have people that we get people apply every day for jobs, whether it's for working on our road show, filming stuff in the HQ here. And we're fortunate to have a lot of great people that apply, and we hire a lot of great people. But we had, nowadays, whenever people come on board or want to be interviewed, I'm like, hey, before we go that far, I want you to go hang out with my team. And I remember the first time I did this about 6 months ago, I had a person go on the road with my team, just go to a couple restaurants with them, hang out, listen, watch. And I called one of my guys in and I said, so what'd you think of him? And he's like, he was kind of being shady about it. I'm like, bro, you have to give me the truth. Like you don't have to sugarcoat anything. I said, this is your team. And if I bring somebody on board that doesn't fit our profile and how badass we are, it's going to be bad. I'm like, is this a person you would want to have lunch with every day of the week and laugh with? And he's like, hell no. I go, well, that's all you got to tell me. He's like, well, you sent him. I thought maybe he was like, had passed some process. I'm like, no, I want to weed out the people that don't fit our culture first, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. And it's tough right now, man, because there's not a lot of people out there to be hired. So it's really easy to fall into this trap of just, settling for a pulse, because you're desperate. And you got to really be careful because, anybody you bring on, that presence, that reality is your culture.
Yeah. And, I'll argue, I think there is a lot of people out there to be hired for work. I think the problem is businesses haven't painted a picture that is appealing. Is that if I go to a restaurant's Facebook page, Instagram, and it's just lame ass marketing and there's nothing, but if I go into another one and it's the owner and his brother and their staff and they're having fun, they're doing different stuff every day. And it's like, man, I might want to be involved in that. I think there's people that want to be involved in the right places, but they haven't found them because places aren't telling that story.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree that the people are out there, but I think we can all agree they're not showing up at the doorsteps of restaurants.
Oh no, well, and I think they're one of the reasons they're not is think about this. And I always remember this is in high school. You know, your high school football coach. You want to be flipping burgers the rest of your life? I mean, it was kind of like the negative that if you were going to be doing something in the restaurant space. I met a guy 2 days ago, Green Steakhouse in Madisonville, Kentucky. The guy has 2 successful restaurants, and he started 17 years old, cleaning, working in the kitchen, doing the grunt work, and he climbed his way up. I think not enough people see that opportunity or see that vision because it's not shown enough.
Well, we only have ourselves to blame in the industry. This is, decades catching up to us of not, we weren't taken as serious as other industries, but at the same time, we're guilty, man. I hate to say it. Over the years, we've been kind of guilty for being shitty employees or employers, I should say. We've been shitty employers. I mean, I don't know if this am I allowed to curse here? Sorry. Okay. But we haven't been that great, there are pros, there's certain pros to the restaurant industry that were alluring to some people, like the fact that we had a looser culture and we could get away with more stuff. But the fact that we let it happen, we are responsible for the reputation we have throughout the culture of, the world, we only have ourselves to blame.
Yeah. I was at a restaurant the other day and I'm at a community table having breakfast one morning, drinking some coffee, eating. And the server said something to me and I asked her back, well, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? How's life? And she's like, I'm stoked. I go, why? She said, I'm going to the beach next week. I said, that's awesome. I just got back. She's like, it's the first time I've ever been. I'm like, first time. And I could tell. I said, well, I'm curious. How old are you? About 30, 35. She goes, yeah, I'm 36 years old. I said, you've never been to the beach? She goes, no. Well, in this business, like we don't get paid time off. And so I don't really have an opportunity. I can't afford to not work every week. And so it's tough. And I'm thinking, man, that's shitty. Like that. How can that person, she's a full-time server at this restaurant. And I don't know, like our employees have paid time off. Now we're a professional environment. I think we have like nine weeks total with regards to certain holidays that our people get full time. But I'm thinking here's a person that's never had the chance as an adult to go to a beach. And I didn't want to tell her I've been like 6 times in the last 3 months, but when she said they didn't have any type of paid time off, I was like, wow, like no wonder nobody wants to work at this place.
Well, exactly. So how are we going to change this?
It's got to come with operators realizing you've got to treat that. You got to put on people what you want on you. Like me, where we have a long weekend every month now. We actually have the month of, I think it's July or August. We couldn't find a holiday. So we did a National Root Beer Float Day. So we're taking a Friday off and we have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off and for National Root Beer Float Day. Where that came from was every Thanksgiving. I love the fact that we have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, at least in the professional. I know restaurants don't have that luxury because they're actually open most of those times, but it's a different conversation that some of the days they probably shouldn't be open, like Thanksgiving. But I always love that fact that it's like, man, this is 4 days. I got nothing to do. And I said, man, let's do this every month. So we have at our company every month that. And the reason we did it was because I like it. And if I like it, I'm not going to just randomly take a long weekend every month. I want everybody to do it. And then we had it last week and everybody loved it.
So what has to happen in the industry for every restaurant to offer benefits, pay time off, health insurance,
I'd say
insurance, all these things?
I don't have the answer above my pay grade. A lot of that. I'd say one thing that has to start. I talked to a restaurant yesterday is raising prices. You've got to be able, I had a consultant tell me recently about raising prices of stuff we do. And he said, Matt, here's how one of the reasons I raised prices years ago on my business and a certain offering was I wanted to be able to over deliver at a massive level. And I looked at it and said, my current pricing, I have not very good margin for error. If I double what I'm doing, what I'm charging and over deliver, now I've got a room for error there. And so I look at the restaurants and, I talk to guys all the time, like, oh, we got wing night. Should we still do wing night? It's costing this much. We're losing money. We're doing this. We haven't done a price raise in a year. I talk to restaurants all the time and do price raises every month or do market pricing on certain stuff. You got to have the margins, number one. You got to have the sales. You got to have the margins. And then you got to understand how to spread the wealth there because the last thing you want is a restaurant that has no money giving people paid time off because now you're going out of business. And They got a lot of time off, but at the same time, you got to have profit. And the only way to get profit is to actually charge what the hell your product's worth.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but I think there's some other variables that don't make it to the conversation as often as they should, like greater big picture variables, like what's happening to all retail space right now over the past 10 years. What's happened to retail space?
Retail space. That's a broad question. I don't know. What do you got?
I would say I would make the argument that most retail doesn't work anymore. So people who own these properties are putting restaurants in this retail space because there's a shift going towards experience based. People want experiences. So we're moving towards an experience based economy where people want to go out. They don't want to just have food. They want to have an experience. But what you're seeing is everybody over the past 10 years through restaurants, all these developers are throwing money at these restaurants because that's the only thing that works in retail space. So you have more restaurants per capita right now than ever before. Then on top of that, you're competing with ghost kitchens, right? Where fewer people are cooking from home and they're ordering out, or they're stopping at grocery stores who are doing much better with prep meals, where you can just go to like the grocery store and have a meal done for you. Like you can get dinner everywhere right now. So there's all these other variables that we're competing with. So, I mean, it's just one of these things where it's like, like how are we supposed to compete with that? It's not just that, I mean, there's so many things that come into this that it's not just that restaurants need to do better. You know what I'm saying?
Oh no, I don't disagree. I mean, there's a lot of variables. I don't think there's probably, you could probably put 20 different variables on it.
Sorry, go ahead.
But I would say one of the biggest things to me is it comes down to the whole saying, treat others how you would want to be treated yourself.
Yeah. I mean, even gas stations today, look what's happening in gas stations. You can go to a gas station and go to a kiosk and have any sandwich. I mean, a lot of those sandwiches are just as good as any fast food place, if not better. I'm thinking like Wawa down in like, the Philly area. And
have you seen a Buc-ee's?
Oh yeah. Through Texas. And I think they're in Louisiana.
There's one in Kentucky now. I went to it last night for the first time.
Yeah.
And I had been seeing these billboards the last couple of times driving up 75 because my daughter goes to college where the Buc-ee's just was put in Richmond, Kentucky. And I'm like, I thought it was like Alvin from Alvin and the Chipmunks. I'm like, Alvin opened a gas station. And I was joking about it. And then yesterday we're on the way back and there's no shit like 100 billboards. I'm like,
yeah,
what kind of gas station is this? Like Buc-ee's. And so we get off and it's pump after pump.
Over 100 pumps. It's ridiculous.
It had to be 200 plus. I thought it said 400. My wife told me I was wrong, but I could have swore it said 400 pumps because they had them numbered, and I saw like 220 and then 300. But it was unbelievable. I've never seen something like that. And you're exactly like, there's a business that I go in there, and it's a restaurant in essence. They had a pulled pork section in the middle, making pulled pork sandwiches, bricks. They had a beef jerky butcher case.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. But here's the thing. For the past 15 years, food across all mediums has been is raising. It's the quality is going up. The competition is going up. So, I mean, it's that's what we're up against right now. So what do restaurants have to do to be profitable with that kind of competition?
Well, to me, they got to raise the bar.
I agree with you. Yeah.
You got to change. You got to be, you heard the terminology red ocean, blue ocean before?
No.
So red ocean, blue ocean is a business analogy that the red ocean is red because the sharks are feeding on the same item. There's blood in the water.
Yeah.
Blue ocean is where your business has separated itself and doing something different. So like, for example, me with our brand, America's Best Restaurants, we are pretty blue ocean marketing. There's no other marketing companies in this country driving door to door, talking to restaurants in person, filming episodes with them about their story. It's just, there's not a marketing company that does that. Red Ocean would be like I used to be 6-7 years ago, sitting in an office, dialing for dollars, calling the restaurants with the same bullshit line about how we can help with marketing. Well, from a restaurant standpoint, I look at it, what can you do that's different than other people? And that can start with obviously different menu items. It can start with being an expert in something. I went to a restaurant the other day that had, I think they literally had food on the menu for every type of restaurant you could ever imagine. And I'm thinking, how can this chef, this cooking team back there, do Mexican steaks, shrimp, different seafoods? I mean, it literally was like everything you could possibly imagine on a menu. And then like block away, there's Raising Cane's doing Cokes, chicken tenders, and French fries.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of, you're pointing out one of the big lessons I've learned on the show, that I think with so many more restaurants out there, you can't be everything to everybody anymore.
Yep.
That used to be a model. You really got to hone in and do one thing really well and own that segment, own the keyword optimization, put all of your energy into training to do one thing really well, to streamline your processes to do one thing really well. And this is one of the big things I'm seeing with all the competition. Focus on one thing, do it really well, own it in your market. And with labor expenses going up and robotics coming into the picture, so I mean, robotics are really only good at doing one thing right now. So if you're thinking about going the robotics route, you can't have 100 things on your menu. The robot won't be able to do all those different things yet, maybe a few years down the road. But right now, Flippy, the miso robotic that raises like the basket, flips burgers and stuff like that, they're really only programmed to do one thing. So if your whole operation is centered around doing one thing and you can do it better than anybody else, you just got to own that menu item. And then when people are in the mood for whatever it is that you do, they're going to come to you. So that's definitely one thing, especially with Ghost Kitchens Online, because it's all about SEO. It's all about owning that keyword. I want a fill in the blank burger. I want a pizza, or I would say get even more obscure and creative. I want a crunch wrap. Open a crunch wrap restaurant where you do nothing but crunch wraps. And that's the thing.
Cereal restaurant. Hey, I want to do something. I got to run and grab my charger for my laptop. While I do that, I want you to tell the audience about the Restaurant Unstoppable podcast. Okay.
All right. I can work on that. So Restaurant Unstoppable podcast started way back in 2012 conceptually, and I launched my first episode in 2013. And the reason why I started the podcast is because I grew up in the restaurant industry. I actually became a commercial pilot, and I decided aviation was not for me. And I wanted to get back into the restaurant industry, but I was way too far in school loan debt to pay off my school loan. So I thought, if I can't work in restaurants, I want to work with restaurants. And I just started asking questions from the most successful restaurateurs about, how they got to where they are, so I can learn. And then basically the idea is, if I can help enough other people open restaurants and become successful, that will come back around to me and serve me some way, somehow. And that's kind of been what I've been, what I believed in, and what it's the beat. What is it's the drum beat I'm marching to.
Yeah, the drum you're beating.
Yeah, the drum I'm beating. And you know what? It's been a great 10-year overnight success, dude.
No, I love it. And you're doing some great stuff. Now, I have this habit of like working on my laptop all day and then never plugging it in. And then the minute I'm not near a charger, it's like flashing at me. So I appreciate you doing that. But no, you said something also there that kind of goes with exactly what I was talking about with the red ocean, blue ocean, is that at some point people have to figure out what that blue ocean is for them. I'll give you an easy example that I've seen how my habits have changed. There's a smoothie shop down the street from me that I go to 3 to 5 times a week. For me, it's a healthy, easy item to go get. Before the pandemic, I walked in, I waited in line, I ordered my product, I waited 5 or 6 minutes, got it and left. Now I sit in my office, I go on their website, I go to order online, I order it, I walk in, I grab it, I leave. And so that little tweak to their business, I mean, there's nothing stopping businesses from making adjustments that force consumers down certain paths to order. I was at a restaurant recently where you ordered, there was a menu on the tables, QR code. They don't have servers, and it's a casual dining restaurant. They don't have servers and the means of taking orders and doing this. And I was talking to the owner, and he's like, when the QR code thing finally took hold, because everybody had been trying in the marketing world for QR codes for like 5 or 6 years, and it took the pandemic to make it actually work. But he said, I saw people were so apt to go into the QR code, go onto my website to look at the menu, that I'm like, labor is tough. And one of our mistakes we have with throwing product away is because we write stuff down wrong. Let's have them scan that QR code and go to a page and say, hey, you order all your food, your server will get it for you and make sure your drinks are never empty. And he said it took away almost no errors, because at that point, the only error is the person like, oh shit, I forgot to do this. But he told me, he's like, it saved me 3 people on that floor. And now one person can literally work that entire floor and give a better experience.
Well, what you're pointing out is this idea of you need system-dependent operations, not people-dependent operations. And right now, maybe you're not ready to have Flippy in your restaurant, but you can definitely get some technology in there to help you streamline systems. And I mean, the way I like to explain what systems are and how technology relates to systems, you can either go through and create all these step-by-step processes and write them out and teach your people how to do this, or you can go to a company who has spent their entire existence trying to figure out how to do this one thing really well and take that technology and plug it into your restaurant. And that's how you have to look at technology. Is there's systems that have been fine-tuned. Examples of these are POS with order taking and just inventory management, all that stuff, or an entire tech stack like Restaurant 365 or Compete, where it's an all-in-one integrated technology stack, and you don't have to go through and flip on all those switches and use all the features. You can turn them on as you scale and as you grow. But you really have to think of from day one. Some people think, oh, I'll get that stuff later. When I'm ready, I'll get that stuff later. But if you can budget, if you're opening a restaurant, there's a good chance you're going to go get $1 million to go open that restaurant, raise $1 million. What's an extra $50,000 to $60,000 on that to have your entire tech stack built out? This $60,000, what's that when you're saving how much on labor? You know what I'm saying? You have to start thinking like this. You have to start thinking you have to start thinking about systems from day one. And if you can plug systems in to your restaurant from day one that are systems that are far better than you could ever create on your own, why wouldn't you go that route? And you have to factor that into the cost of every menu item. And you have to reverse engineer the cost of running your business, and that it has to reflect on your menu. You pointed this out earlier. You have to raise your prices. And I think I was kind of trying to get to that earlier. I was like, Matt, what has to happen? What has to happen? What has to happen? Prices have to go up. But here's the thing. We have to hook arms, man. We got to link arms. We got to create a chain. We got to do it together. We have to stop looking at the guy down the street or the girl down the street as our competition. Yes, we are competing for business against them, but guess what, man? And one of the biggest lessons I've learned in almost 900 interviews is it's those who go together go further. Yep. Lean on your quote unquote competition. Ask them questions, share knowledge with your neighbors, go into this together, help each other out. We have to start thinking like a collective, because if we don't start thinking like a collective, if we start competing against each other and price gouging each other, like we just, it's not going to be good for us. You know what I mean? We're hurting ourselves.
Have you ever interviewed Bruce Nelson?
No.
You need to. He's I think what his actual title is. I want to say like math guy for a restaurant chain out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Maybe like COO, probably something of that nature, but absolute genius. I have him on in a couple of weeks to go in depth about his integration of Restaurant 365. He recently did a testimonial for them. He's written a couple of accounting restaurant books. Awesome dude. And I know you only interview people on the podcast that are recommended. There's a referral for a guy that's
there are ways to get on, but I really try to make that the number one.
No, that's and I appreciate that. Yeah. He's an awesome guy. But him and I were talking about this a while back, that his book talks about when he opened up, he had failed. He opened up some restaurants and failed. And he said, one of the biggest things I made a mistake of was when I opened my restaurants, I priced my burger based on the place I left. Mm-hmm. Not my actual burger I was making, but the burger I left there. And I was talking to a restaurant owner recently, and this was pretty cool. And I was actually telling this story today. I was up meeting with Peter Wiley and Ray Wiley, a brand called Hothead Burritos, and Kelly Gray about some cool stuff we're trying to put together for them. And we were talking about stuff, and I was telling them this story. They loved it. It would be hard as shit for them to initiate with 80-something locations. But I was talking to this restaurant owner, and he said, I decided when the QR code thing happened that I had an idea. I was going to send no more printed menus. It saved me money, saved me all the changes. And I was going to send people to a digital menu on my website. But even deeper, every week he has a spreadsheet he created with his entire menu, and he plugs in the cost that week from US Foods or Cisco or PFG or whoever he uses. He plugs that cost in, and it calculates his prices on his menus based on what he's paying that week. Yeah. And his comment was, I don't have to have that uncomfortable conversation now. Hey, we're raising prices. Everybody's scared shitless to raise prices, and they think the world's going to leave them. He said, Matt, and last time I talked to him, it was 6 months in, he'd not had a single customer reference the fact that one day the burger was $9.28, the next day it was $11.13, the next week it was $12, the next week it was $8. It's 100% based off of what he's paying. And he said the cool part about it was that literally saved me a $400 to $600 loss of not pricing correctly and not being able to change often enough because of today's market. You take $500 times 52 weeks a year. I mean, that's the difference between paying your employees better and having paid time off.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that's exactly what needs to happen. You need to figure out exactly what it costs to operate your business, figure out what percentage profit you want to make, bake it in. And then as prices are changing, why wouldn't you pay that forward to the consumer? Why should you take a hit? As this is a business, man, we're here to make money, and the consumer, we're providing a service, and it costs are variable. And if you're just focusing on that percentage of profit, you gotta adjust appropriately to make that percentage. If prices go up, your prices go up. And I think part of why that was such an issue in the past is if the price went up 5 cents, it costs $500 to print out, hundreds of menus. So it didn't make sense back in the day. But now that things are digital, we can make these, we can turn on a dime, we can make adjustments. I think the only other thing that you left out that I would add on is that if consumers do bitch and moan, it's time for us to say, no, F you. Like, I love you. Thank you for coming to my business, but come sit down with me. Let me show you what it costs to make this burger. This is what it costs. You want good food? You want food sourced, sustainably, ethically? That costs money. And we have to charge appropriately. Food is expensive. Back in like the 1940s, 1930s, the average household spent 30% of their income on food. Today, they spent 9%. The food system's messed up, dude. And we let it get this way because we were trying to cut corners and trying to increase our margins by shrinking
it's the race to the
do
bottom.
Shit cheaply. Yeah. Like if we can do something cheaply, like we can increase our margins. And we've gotten to a point where we couldn't squeeze any more water out of the rock, and the food isn't food anymore, and now we have to start pushing back in the other direction if we're going to expect any difference. But we have to share knowledge. I think the final part of this is we have to educate the consumer. So Restaurant Unstoppable's mission is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. If we transform the industry, aka educate owners on how to be profitable, not just how to be profitable, but also how to be a respectful business, how to do business well, how to have a culture, how to take care of your employees, how to do all these things that big corporations do. And we inject integrity back into the industry, then the industry will be like, F you, consumer. We're not budging. We want to be respected, and you need to respect us. That's what has to happen. And that comes from us educating the consumer about where their food comes from, what it costs to do business, and not budging and saying, we want to be legitimate. We want to attract real people. We want to provide opportunities to people. If you transform the restaurant industry, I fucking believe this, my core, you will transform the world, because so many people, we are such influencers. And that's really at the crux of what I'm trying to do, is transform the world.
What's comical about that also is if go to McDonald's. I don't eat at McDonald's much, but I did price something out the other day. This meal at McDonald's was like $9.50. And I hear restaurant owners, I was at a restaurant yesterday, and badass burger. And it was great. And I'm like, what is the menu costing us? He's like $8.59. I'm like, dude, this is a $16 burger.
Yeah.
Like, I know,
again, Matt, we're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah. He's like, I know where we're at, the part of Kentucky. And he had these reasons, and some of them were valid. Some of them were valid. The other ones, I'm like, you know what? Who cares? This burger, this is a $7 burger at the size of this at McDonald's, and this is 10 times better. This should be a $15 to $20 burger. You know what? If you lose 20% of the people who are going to pay at $8, I think the math works out that's 80% that'll pay the 16 is pretty good math.
Yeah. But it's just like, if we want change, if we want things to be better, we have to start educating each other. We have to start lifting each other up. And I think we really have to start educating the consumer. But here's the thing. If only a few of us do this, I think Danny Meyer is a great example, right? So Danny Meyer said, this is broken. The business model for restaurants is broken. Tipping doesn't make any sense. I'm going to bake the tip right into the check because we should be charging for this. It's a service right? That's what makes sense. And he kind of took one for the industry. He took one for the team because he was the first to take the leap and didn't really catch on, but he created so much awareness about what's wrong with the industry, and if we can't make change unless if it's just one person. It has to be a collective. It has to be a group effort. But the thing is, now is the time that it's going to happen, because never before have we been able to transfer information like we can today. We can share knowledge like never before. I think one of the biggest things that held the restaurant industry back is the successful restaurants kept these secrets close to their chest.
Oh yeah.
And that was one of the biggest reasons why the restaurant industry was staying where it was while the world was advancing ahead. And I think what's happening overnight, you're seeing is we're starting to realize the more I give, the more I make it about everyone else, the better off I am, because it all comes back around. And this is starting to become universal knowledge, and this idea of abundance is really starting to get a foothold. So it's exciting times.
Love it. And so I'm going to guess that these are the topics that if I tune in to Restaurant Unstoppable podcast, which can be found on restaurantunstoppable.com, this is the type of content I can consistently hear from leaders in the industry. Yeah. Is that accurate?
So every Monday, every 2 months I'm on the road. That's kind of what we're trying to do. I'm on the road for about a week to 2 weeks, and I'm going after restaurateurs to be in their space, to be sitting across the table from them, much like you do with America's Best Restaurants. So you just can't beat being in person.
Yep. Oh, you can't.
And I'm just trying to get their life story out. Sometimes we go 2.5 hours long, and it's just like, who are you? Behind every great restaurant is a great person. So really the focus is on the person behind the restaurant. Who are you? What are your beliefs? What are your values? What's your knowledge? How did you get here? If I'm the version of you 30 years ago, tell me what you wish you knew then, is really what I'm trying to do. That's every Monday. And then every Thursday I'm back home, and I'm looking at those 8 interviews that I did on the road. And I'm saying, well, this was mentioned, that was mentioned, this book was mentioned, this person was referred to me. And I'm following up on the clues, and I'm inviting them to do live interviews like we're doing here today to kind of just pull back the layers and go deeper. So I had David Dressler from Tender Greens on the show. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that brand.
You're going to say Tender.
Tender Greens. So they ended up selling Tender Greens to Union Square Hospitality Group. They've retired. Now they're focusing on their passions. So I'm having David Dressler. I read his book, 10-Year Plan, where they share their story. And I'm like, what are you focusing on today? He's like, oh, I coach restaurants how to do what I did. I'm like, what's your specialty? He's like, we're going to be talking about deconstructive creation. So what the hell is deconstructive creation? If you're going into an organization and you need to change things, you need to break it down before you can build it up. So it's like all these little details. So we're doing a whole lecture on that. And then he connected me with his business partner, Eric Oberholzer, who was episode 277, like 6 years ago. He's coming back to talk about regenerative farming and biodiversity and food transparency and what NFTs are doing for food transparency. Because now with NFTs, if you bought a fish off the line, like if you bought a fish in a restaurant, you can figure out which fisherman caught that. Not just like, you can find out whether it was caught in a net or on a hook and line. Like there's so much transparency now with NFTs. This is the kind of stuff that's going to transform our industry, because we're moving in a direction of conscious capitalism where the consumer is starting to realize, hey, like, I just want to be happy and healthy. And we're starting to realize that being happy and healthy is a lot more attainable than we think. And we sacrifice a lot of our happiness for money, but money won't, we're starting to realize money's not going to make us happy. It's living intentionally and having purpose that's going to make us happy. Yeah. I think the consumer is starting to realize this. So people are going to start putting their money in places that make them feel better. And that's the one thing that independent operators have going for them, is that we can, if we choose to make conscious decisions, we can pay it forward to the consumer and educate the consumer on what's going to make them happy. So that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to do.
Well, I love it. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you spending your Friday afternoon with me and hanging out. So everybody, restaurantunstoppable.com. The podcast is on all the platforms, audio and video, right?
Yeah. And I do want to let people know that we have what I'm calling a Restaurant Unstoppable Network. Yep. You're in the network. I'm pretty sure you have access to the network. And these Thursday episodes, when I'm getting these restaurant tours, these famous restaurant tours, and these leaders in the industry recording, these are live recordings. So if you're in the network, you get to join me live for these recordings, and we always do a Q&A at the end. So I'm literally putting you in the same room, even though it's virtual room. I'm putting you in the same room with the best restaurant tours in the industry. It's a membership site. It's $30 a month. It's $1 a day to have access to the best minds in the industry. And not only that, other restaurant operators across the country, we're coming together, we're supporting each other. And because we realize if we're going to change the industry, if we're going to transform the industry, we have to do it together. We have to share knowledge. We have to lock arms. We have to share this information. So that's restaurantunstoppablenetwork.com.
restaurantunstoppablenetwork.com. I'm sure there's a link on restaurantunstoppable.com to take you there. Make sure you get joined. There it is. There's the hat. Got the hat on. We need to get some orange on that, though. We need an orange hat, I think.
Well, there's this one, too. I don't know if there's orange. I'm colorblind.
Oh, yeah. That's green. Yeah, that's actually how I saw you the first time when you were hosting your podcast at the TRA show when I spoke there 3 years ago. That's how I first saw you, that logo.
That's it, man.
Well, cool. Well, thanks, brother. I appreciate it. And, everybody check him out. Well, have a good weekend.
Cheers.